All right, here we are, Chapter 6, Part 2, continuing and finishing up protein. So to review, this is again, I'm trying to go for the review section. So we're looking at the main components of protein for protein digestion. So what do we need to digest the protein? We already talked about it being amino acids in chains and in branched or three-dimensional configuration. So when we eat something with protein, it goes from your mouth down your esophagus into your stomach, and because amino acid chains are very difficult to break, it does require the stomach acids to start the digestion. So unlike carbohydrates, which don't really do that much in the stomach, there is quite a bit of action that goes on, and that is caused by the pepsin. This is the enzyme that's actually in the stomach. So this is unlike the other, there is some lipase in the stomach, but unlike carbs, pepsin is needed in the stomach. Also, hydrochloric acid is needed in the stomach. And then as it moves to the small intestine, there's some more enzymes, pancreatic proteases, so proteinases. So these are the different enzymes that break down the protein from the pancreas in the small intestine. So remember, food does not go into the pancreas. The pancreas only excretes enzymes. I didn't mention the two hormones. So this gastrin hormone is what helps trigger the hydrochloric acid production. So as you're starting to eat, more acid is made so that it can help break down protein. And then cholecystokinin, or CCK, is released by the gallbladder so that it will then tell the pancreas to release enzymes. So these are the precursors. These have to be in action or activated to tell this to be activated. This gastrin has to be activated to tell this enzyme and hydrochloric acid to be activated. So those are the important components of digestion. And then what actually happens is the gastrin then, even when you just think about food, it starts helping the production of hydrochloric acid from the cells in the stomach. And what is important is this pepsinogen is produced, but pepsinogen is inactive. It's not able to do anything in that condition. It has to be just a small piece of that protein has to be removed so that it can actually be activated. So this occurs in the stomach where it's called a proenzyme, which means it's going to be an enzyme, it's prepared to be one, but it has to have one piece of action occur. So there's a little video you probably watched, but the pepsinogen can be broken down. A little piece can be broken off so that it becomes active as pepsin. And now that it's activated, it can start breaking down the peptide bonds. So in other words, the bonds between each amino acid. And then the hydrochloric acid we mentioned also can denature the peptide bonds in these long chains, these polypeptides. So those are two very important aspects of protein digestion. And then once the protein goes to the small intestine, then we mentioned the CCK from the walls of the small intestine can trigger the pancreatic enzyme to be released, and this continues to break down the peptides into smaller peptides and amino acids for absorption. So that's two steps, the stomach and the small intestine, and all the enzymes that are needed to do that job. So now once they're absorbed, they will absorb right there at the surface of the small intestine on the microvilli. So remember we talked about these little villi, a huge amount of surface area. The amino acids can get right into that one cell wall, the enterocyte, inside the cell. And we've already talked about how the amino acids in the cell are needed by the transfer RNA to build new proteins on the ribosomes. And then it can be released into the hepatic portal system to the liver. So now you've got your actual proteins ready to go. If you have excess protein, you eat excess, it will just be converted to fat, because if your cells don't need it to rebuild tissue or muscle, it has to go somewhere. And if you don't have enough fat or carbohydrate, it can convert amino acids to glucose and can be used for energy. So it's pretty flexible. It can be stored as fat, it can be burned as energy, or it can be used as is to rebuild tissues that have broken down. Here's just the final little picture of protein. So you chew the food, it increases the surface area, then gastrin is secreted in the stomach. As you're chewing, it starts moving into allowing the stomach to make more hydrochloric acid. And then pepsinogen becomes activated to pepsin, and as the food moves to the small intestine, the peptidases from the pancreas are secreted by CCK, and they continue to work on it until it's absorbed into the enterocytes of the small intestine, and then they go into the cells, make new proteins, and move into the liver for production, for either storage or further use. We've already talked about gluten many times, but if you have a malabsorption, if you have gluten sensitivity, you would have malabsorption syndrome because you don't have that surface area. So a lot of proteins might not be absorbed, just like other nutrients might not be absorbed. So what are the functions of protein? Protein has a lot of different functions in the body besides just rebuilding muscle and tissue. We think about that a lot. It has other functions, which one of which is to building the cells. So they think of all the different kinds of cells you have that have to be rebuilt. So like hemoglobin is a protein that lasts maybe 120 days. Your tongue cells last a couple of weeks. So you're constantly rebuilding cells that deteriorate. Another function is fluid balance. So in order to maintain the fluid in your blood vessels, you have to have minerals and protein. So albumin is the name of what we call the protein in your blood. If you don't have enough protein and other minerals in your blood supply, then to balance the water in and inside your cell and outside in your blood and outside your blood cells, then you would move, if you didn't have enough protein in your blood, then fluid might move out into your tissues. If you have enough protein, then the fluid would balance and move into the tissues, but it can cause, if it's not balanced, you can cause edema or swelling. You might see swelling around your feet or your wrists. That could be a lack of protein. You'll see that in people that are malnourished and have too little protein in their bodies. Another function would be, that's just the same thing. Here it contributes to acid and base balance. Remember, we have to keep our body at a slightly alkaline 7.4, and if it gets too high, too low, it can destroy our organs. So protein can contribute hydrogen from, remember, it has a hydrogen on it, to contribute hydrogen to keep the balance in good status. Another function, is that the second? So the third one would be bacteria. So having that acid base is also protective because we can, whenever we get certain foodborne illness or other bacteria, some of it can be killed by the high acid content in our stomach, and others may not, but it does prevent some things from surviving. And we'll talk about that in the foodborne illness chapter. Also, many hormones are protein. So insulin is actually a protein. These are tyrosine, which is from the thyroid, is another hormone. So these are proteins which, if we don't have enough, our hormones would not work properly. Here as enzymes, we talked about all the enzymes of protein. Even the protein that breaks down protein is a protein. So it's very important for that. Contributing to immune function. So antibodies, antigens are proteins. So we can't have good health if we don't have enough protein. It's an energy source, as we already mentioned. So if we don't have enough carbohydrate, we can actually make glucose from protein. It's called gluconeogenesis. It means making glucose from something else, new, making glucose new, making. So it's in the Krebs cycle, it can actually pull off the amino acids and use them for energy and convert them to glucose. Another function of protein is it helps with satiety. So eating protein at every meal, not just eating carbs, makes you feel full or longer and helps be able to concentrate. And then proteins are also used for transport. So they transport oxygen in the form of hemoglobin. They carry fats in the form of lipoproteins. They also carry minerals and allow minerals to move in and out of cells by the protein receptors on the cells. So there's a lot of functions for protein. And the next thing we'll just want to know then is, if we have to have protein so much, how much do we actually need? Like, what is the actual need for our bodies? So this shows here that the average, for just a non-athlete, average adult, 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of healthy body weight. So you can convert your weight from kilograms to pounds by taking pounds divided by 2.2, and you get, in this case, 70. And you simply multiply the kilograms by 0.8. So this person needs 56 grams of protein a day. Well, what does that mean? Remember, every gram contributes 4 calories. So to kind of look at what that would look like, here is a child might need 13 grams, and then a woman might need 46, and a guy 56. That'd be the minimal for someone who's not working out. And as far as percent of calories, 10 to 15% or 10 to 35% is the range, which is quite a large range. And they're suggesting a little more than 10%. 10% is pretty low. If you're an athlete, you might need as much as twice twice the amount of 0.08. You might multiply your weight times 1.7 grams because of all the muscle growing and building that's going on. And then we can measure what we call nitrogen balance, because protein is the only macronutrient that has nitrogen in it. You could determine from somebody how they're doing, if they're burning too much or too little protein, by measuring the nitrogen they take in and compare to the nitrogen they take out. So you just measure the nitrogen in their urine, and you measure the nitrogen in the protein they're eating. And if it's even, that's called a balance. But if you have a negative nitrogen balance, that means you're consuming a fair amount of nitrogen as protein, but you're excreting more. So it's like, why are you excreting more than you're taking in? So that usually, in the case of starvation, where you're actually you're burning more nitrogen than you're actually consuming, which means you're burning muscle or you're burning your own tissue for energy, because you're going to use protein for energy if you don't have it any other way. And then the positive nitrogen balance would be the opposite, where you're consuming protein, but you're excreting less than you're taking in. And so that's because your body's using a lot of protein to build new tissue. So in the case of a pregnant woman or a child that's growing, they might be eating X amount of protein, but they're not releasing as much nitrogen as they take in because they're using it to grow. So those are some of the terms you might have. And then this is a review that you probably already know because you did your 3-day recall already. But how do we measure protein? So what we use often is protein ounce equivalents, we mentioned, because you don't always eat meat. But if you don't want to eat meat, there's other ways of getting protein. So this is a 4-ounce piece of chicken, but you could just eat a 1/4 cup of dry cooked beans. It'd be the same as getting 1 ounce of meat. Or you could eat 1 egg, or you could have 1 tablespoon of peanut butter, or 1 ounce of almonds, and all of those would give the same protein as 1 ounce of meat, if you want to make it equal that way. And the last thing here is just, is it okay to take large amounts of protein? So amino acid supplements, are they safe or not? And that's for you to decide. That you might think it's helping, but it is harder on your kidneys, especially if they have any kidney issues. It's definitely a difficult thing for them, but you should probably drink extra fluid if you're going to take protein supplements. And I don't have the picture here, but people that have too little protein have a disease called kwashiorkor, which means they have a lot of swelling. So just like the picture we saw with the swelling, the edema, that can be serious if you don't get enough protein, and for third world countries that could be the case, and then you have anemia. Okay, so then you'd have edema where you would have swelling. So that's what's called kwashiorkor. And another disease or illness for those that don't get enough calories or protein is called marasmus. You might encounter these problems if you're in a third world country, or even someone with eating disorders could have either one of those conditions, where they're not getting enough protein because they're trying to cut back on their calories, or they're not getting enough calories or protein. And you can see wasting of muscle. So you'll just see skin and bones basically for that person. So that's the end of this chapter, I think, that we have for proteins, and those are the good review points for you to look over. All right, thank you.